first session of the afternoon after lunch, so I think we're running a little behind schedule. We're going to, I think, have a few people continue to filter in. But thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michael McGarry. I'm a board member of the Continuum Health Alliance. I'm also the Director of Transformational Development at Ascension Health, which is a large nonprofit care provider in the United States. The topic today is one that is probably one that I'm most passionate about. We can get so consumed in these talks of technology that we tend to forget that there's actually a patient involved. There's an actual human being, and we never want to lose that. So we've got a great panel today that represent everything from neurosurgeons to patients themselves to give that patient perspective. What's the appropriate use of technology? What are the limitations of technology? Those types of topics is what we'll cover. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, give a little quick background on kind of who they are and what they're bringing to the discussion. We'll go through a few formal questions, and then we quickly want to turn it out to the audience to address any questions that you might have. So why don't we start at the end there?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a brain surgeon, not a brainy one, a brain surgeon who subsequently migrated into telemedicine. I'm here as a neurosurgeon, not as a telemedicine enthusiast. I still spend about 40% of my time in neurosurgery, though I was a full-time neurosurgeon until recently. So I look forward to being the devil's advocate and deliberately provocating the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you, sir. All right, I represent an organization. My name is Narayan Hrudalia, Bangalore. I'm not a clinician though, but I have put a lot of time into the technology sector. So I'll be looking at the applications of technology, wherein I feel the technology has been more like a catalyst between the healthcare and the patient and delivery. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Bhuvnesh Agrawal. I'm a medical doctor, a specialist in internal medicine. But I've been working for Roche Diagnostics for the last 20 years. I'll try to give a perspective on how we can use telemedicine to improve diagnostic care of patients.
I'm Vandana Gupta. I'm a recovered cancer patient and run an organization for cancer patients called WeCare Foundation. I'll be the confused patient who all of them will try to convince in some way or the other.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anirudh Malpani. Professionally, I'm a full-time IVF specialist, but the primary reason I'm here is I try to be what I call a patient advocate. We run a free patient education library in Bombay. This is called HELP, or the Health Education Library for People. And what we're trying to promote is information therapy so that we can put patients first. And we never forget that the only reason the entire healthcare industry exists is for the sake of the patient.
Good afternoon. I am a radiation oncologist as well as a public health person. And for last 12 years working in the government of India. And my passion is NCDs, and I look after organ transplant issues also. And in 5 to 8 minutes, I will try to give you a glimpse the problem of NCD and what we are doing in the government.
You want to do that now? Yeah. Well, the mic on the podium is probably working there.
Where is it? It has loaded here. I don't know. Yeah, this one. Yeah, I will skip this. Yeah, when we talk of the health, there are several factors. And every factor affects the body, and especially the NCDs. And I will not enumerate because of paucity of time. And it is very clear, if you have to tackle NCDs, you have to map the NCD epidemic, reduce the level of exposure to risk factors, and strengthen the healthcare for the people with NCDs. And the NCDs are growing in the last century, while the communicable diseases are coming down gradually. The deaths due to NCDs are about 60% globally, while in India 50% of deaths are due to NCDs. This I will skip. Yeah, 20% of population have at least one chronic disease, so it is so grave. More than 10% have more than one chronic disease. This is just, burden of NCDs, and already we have a lot of patients, especially diabetes, about 5 crore or 51 million. And other things, heart disease, etc. But what has not been discussed is kidney disease, lung disease, mental disorders, iodine deficiency, fluorosis, osteoporosis. So practically it's a gamut of NCDs. And briefly I will tell you there are four main NCDs: diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and lung disease. These are affected by the 8 risk factors. And out of these 8 risk factors, the blood glucose level and raised blood pressure, they are the risk factors as well as they are disease also. This is to show you that the behavior risk factors lead to physiological risk factors and they lead to diseases. So we have to act on all these levels separately. This is about tobacco use in India. Now I will tell you what we have been doing. This is about the National Rural Health Mission. On the right side, you will see it's a healthcare delivery system. There are state health societies, district health societies, CHC, PHC, and sub-center. And at sub-center, we have a health worker known as ASHA, or the Accredited Social Health Activist. And in the middle, you will see there are various missions from state till below. And we have state and other district level management units. This is what was done in the 11th plan. We have 5-year plans in India. Till 2007, these were the national programs: cancer, blindness, mental health, iodine deficiency, tobacco, trauma care, and deafness. Then in the current 5-year, that is 7 to 12, we introduced fluorosis program, oral health, then national program for prevention control of cancer, diabetes, CVD, stroke, elderly, burns, and physical medicine rehabilitation, disaster, and organ transplant. And there are various experiences, and it was felt that health promotion and prevention need to be given more attention, not only the tertiary care. This I will skip. This is about blindness. We are doing about 5 million cataracts a year. And this is a new program we started last year. It includes cancer also. Cancer is an old program. It's since '74. And in last year, it contains 4 diseases: cancer, diabetes, CVD, and stroke. It's a common program because we have common prevention action points. The strategies are promotion of healthy lifestyle, opportunistic screening, comprehensive examination, diagnosis management, development of manpower, etc. And this is to give you a glimpse that in 21 states, we are implementing in 100 districts, in 700 CHCs at 20,000 sub-centers. And the amount is also indicated below for cancer and diabetes separately. These are the various interventions. I will not go into detail. Basically, health promotion, early diagnosis, case management, capacity building. Then NCD service at sub-center, we have introduced opportunistic screening. And at the CHC, there will be NCD clinic with some manpower given, with investigations and home-based care. And district hospital will also be given manpower and drugs and strengthening of CCU and other things. And we have a tertiary cancer care set up for which we give 6 crore rupees to 65 centers. This is about the growth of cancer treatment machines in India. And now I will share with you, this I will skip. Yeah, the strategies for the 12th plan, that is from 2012 till 17. These are my last 3 slides. Health promotion, specific prevention, early diagnosis, infrastructure development, human resource, emergency medical service, treatment and care, population and evidence-based intervention, and building evidence. This I will skip. Yeah, basically it will have primary health care, secondary health care, tertiary health care, emergency medical care, and health promotion. This I will skip. Yeah, we will have about 30 programs. Some program will be on lifestyle chronic diseases. This is for the next 5 years. Cancer, diabetes, etc. Then lung disease, kidney, organ transplant, mental health, iodine deficiency, fluorosis. We will have program for disability prevention. The green ones are the new program which we have proposed. We have made the program. We are given to Planning Commission. This is total comes to about 55,000 crore. So we don't know how much will be given, but it is 5 times of what is already existing in India. And some more programs have been proposed in tobacco, etc. So some expected outcomes. Okay, thank you very much.
That was incredibly fast. I think it gave a great overview of, I think, what we're facing. And I wouldn't say that's exclusive to India. And that could almost represent just about any country, the data that flew by the screen there. So the first question to the panel then is, how does technology help? When is it appropriate to assist the patient or the caregiver in reducing cost, increasing access, those types of things? So you have a quick video that I think kind of gives a demonstration of that. And then, what's that? Yeah, I'll probably take it up now. Yeah. So while he's queuing up that video, if the panel wants to give a little thought, I think my understanding is it's about 30 seconds or 50 seconds for the video, a demonstration of the use of technology, and then we'll go to the rest of the panel to give their thoughts on the subject.
Let me speak for about another minute before the video. So what we did here to make technology as a catalyst was to deploy this at the ground level where the GPs and the physicians are, where there are no cardiologists to opine for an ECG. And we did a small homework to understand which was the maximum penetrative communication channel. The first thing that came up to us was the post offices. When the Britishers ruled us, they left us a very efficient system of post office. The next one was the telephone line, which was laid down by the BSNL folks when probably they started their system of expansion. So we used the telephone line and we created a system where an ECG could be transmitted through a telephone line back to the hospital, and where in our hospital the doctors would go through the ECG and opine for it. Probably this would take not more than 3 to 5 minutes. So this was a system where we started with about 14 ECG machines, and today we run about more than 450 ECG centers, not only across India but across the world. I'm just going to be showing you a 50-minute small documentary.
Indians are genetically 3 times more vulnerable for heart attack than Europeans. The problem of heart attack is these patients who develop an attack, they don't know it is an attack. They go to the GP. GPs don't have an ECG machine. So heart attack doesn't get diagnosed. So we want to put an ECG machine in every GP's office. And this box here is called Trans-Telephonic ECG machine. And transmitting the ECG from this machine to our hospital to the telephone line is done by a software which is developed by our own in-house software organization, which we give it to the doctors free of cost. The transmission from the GP's office to our hospital takes place to the ordinary telephone line, so that we can give the ECG to the patient before he can put on his shirt, irrespective of which part of the country he is in.
I'm not going to bore you again. We're working now with Boeing to put the system on their flights. Now, interestingly, why Boeing? Probably I spoke about this yesterday. If you have seen the latest movie, The Three Idiots, the movie Three Idiots, you had the first shot of the movie is the person holds his hand near the chest and he forcibly lands the plane because he has to get down to meet his friend. But this problem is still persistent in a lot of these airlines. All the Boeing aircrafts have defibrillators put up on the aircraft, but sadly, they don't have crew members who could probably know to differentiate between a chest pain which caused due to heart malfunction or a gas or other malfunctions of the body parts. So now Boeing said that they'll probably put the systems on their flight where they would send the ECG to us before forcibly landing this plane. So this is one of the applications of technology where we used it and probably made a difference. Thank you.
Pass this. So again, why don't we just start at the end, and we kind of one by one. So I think a great example there of how technology is being used, I think most important there in a very low-cost way, using standard telephone lines, you said. So when we start thinking about the solutions, well, real quick at the audience, how many folks are technology versus doctors, caregivers? So most everybody here, it seems, are more technologists. So when we're thinking of our solutions, we don't need the highest cost, most elaborate. In the consumer world, I think we had that direction. What's the latest and greatest? But in healthcare, that may not be necessary. How about your thoughts here?
I obviously love technology. I embrace technology, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But I belong to the BC era, before computers and before Christ are one and the same. I am worried, I am concerned that, no offense meant to anybody, but I am worried that the industry is pushing technology so much that the youngster of today, the younger doctor of today, my students and their students, cannot manage a patient without technology, A. B, they use technology as the be-all and end-all of diagnosis and treatment. I think, I still practice neurosurgery, I treat a patient using technology to give me some information, relevant to the particular problem which the patient has. I'll give you an example. There are many people here, 50 plus. If we do an MRI for us, I'm 99% sure I'll have multiple discs both in my neck as well as in my back. And if I show this technology through telemedicine and send this picture, a teleradiologist or a neurologist at the other end will advise surgery. I certainly don't want my back to be open because I have absolutely no symptoms at all. I'm asymptomatic. So I want to stress again and again the technology in search of an application, which is what is happening now. Somebody develops an app and then they say, why can't we use it for diabetes? Why can't we use it for something else? Why can't we use it for that? I think it should be the other way about. The end user, the medical doctor, and I'm very concerned that less than 10% of the 400 attendees in this conference are medical practicing doctors. The medical doctor should come to the brilliant technologist sitting here and tell you, look, this is my problem. I want some assistance. Can you assist me? And my final take-home message is, please, please, please treat a human being. Do not treat a laboratory investigation. Do not treat a shadow, however sophisticated the shadow is. Today with a 320 slice CT, we were the 7th in the world to get a 320 slice cardiac CT. You will pick up atheromatous plaques in the coronary artery, and there are enough data today to show in peer-reviewed journals that stenting, a lot of so-called preventive stenting has caused problems in the long run. Sir Muir Gray, Chief Knowledge Officer of the National Health Service, has published brilliant papers where he has shown that the greater the technology, the more access to technology, this is published, the more access to technology, the more expenses incurred, and Lord Nigel Crisp was with us earlier. If you ask him, he will corroborate it, means that the outcome is more disastrous and deleterious. Please do not for a moment think that access to improved technology translates into better outcome. It is not so. It is a judicial use of technology alone which will translate to better health outcome.
So I'd like to
Thank you.
I'd like to take the opposite stance on that. Yeah, I'm already afraid of that. So, unfortunately, at the end, you said judicious use, and so obviously, very little disagreement on that point. But I do strongly feel that number one, we should treat a patient and not a laboratory value. So, fully agree on that. And by the way, I'm happy that you're not sending my brain scans. Otherwise, probably as a neurosurgeon, you'd be opening something up there as well for correction. Thank you. You'll know after my question. So, if I look at my own experience with telemedicine, in Germany, we did a program where we had children with type 1 diabetes in rural areas. They had no diabetes specialist in that area. And what we did is we transmitted their values to a diabetes specialist clinic and at the same time to their GP. The diabetes specialist clinic would actually transmit the recommendations back to the GP who would then treat the child. Through that, we found that we could improve their HbA1c values, and above all, we could reduce the hospitalizations in these children dramatically. And I think this is where it should be used. So this is something which had low cost. At that time, we were using modems. And secondly, we were able to improve outcomes significantly. Similarly, a lot of heart valve patients who have been operated on get warfarin. Now, warfarin management is a pretty tricky thing, and not many of us know even INR values actually scintillate or oscillate just like blood glucose values from day to day. And here, a self-monitoring by a patient can dramatically improve his time in therapeutic range and with that outcomes. So I feel that there are areas where technology can help us to live lives better, to reduce the amount of complications, and through that, improve outcomes and improve quality of life. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Gupta, who will give a patient perspective.
I agree with all the technology, and provided it is not so complicated and easily understood by the patient. When we are talking here, we are talking in context of the rural areas and the remote places. Education level and understanding in these areas may not be up to what is required for these technologies to be taken in. And also, I think in India, we are still used to seeing a physical doctor. We need to see him, meet him, talk to him, and hear about him. So if it is all on technology, if it's all on the picture, how much would it really be understood or appreciated? In context of cancer where I deal with, I would like to say that, there are tests which have to be done, MRIs, CT scans, all these have to be taken. Now, if a patient has to go to a center to get all this done, then the telemedicine probably loses its impact to some extent, because the images, if he's already taken the trouble to go, we are saying that it is going to help him, that he doesn't have to go out of his house, he can be cared for at home, all those things. But the moment he has gone out, then he has lost that very purpose. So I feel that maybe for early detection and awareness, where you can create awareness about it through messages which can be in the language which a patient or a person understands. For the actual treatment, I'm really not sure. Besides, one more point that comes to mind is that, all these telemedicine meetings and conferences, I mean, the meetings in a village or a rural area happen on a particular day. And suppose that day has passed when I have been diagnosed with something, which means I wait for another couple of days for my turn to come in. Will I have the patience? Will I like to stay on and wait for that time? I'm not sure. And then the third thing that comes to mind is the electrical problem. We know that electricity is not really 100% all the time. And so we may not get the results. And so again, the delays which we are trying to avoid may set in. So these are some of the things which come to my mind as a patient immediately. And we always talk of, one disease or another disease and put them into different compartments. But if we can take the whole thing in totality, I think that is what will make a lot of difference, because it's one human being who is being treated for all these things. So, I mean, let's not get into this area of diabetes or heart or brain or something. It's one individual. So if the whole thing starts to look at a patient, at a person from a perspective that, it has to be done in totality, maybe it might be helpful.
Like any technology, like anything else, can be used well and it can be used badly. And just because some doctors choose to use it badly, therefore to throw the baby out with the bathwater, doesn't make any sense. And I think just because Dr. Ganpati was, BC, doesn't mean that doctors like me who were born, I won't say born with computer, but born using computers, doesn't mean we're less empathetic or that we care less for our patients. I think we know how to use computers and when to use computers. So rather than be afraid of them, we said this is one of the additional tools which we can use. Just to elaborate, I think the important thing is that a good doctor will not treat an image. A good doctor will treat a patient. However, the trouble with talking to doctors is good doctors, you don't need to tell them anything anyway. Dr. Ganpati will always take good care of his patients. There is no point in talking to bad doctors because no matter what you tell them, they're never going to improve. Therefore, our focus has always been on talking to patients. And the best way of using this technology is to empower patients with the information therapy. The amount of information you can provide a patient, it's not enough just to provide the CT scan image. You can provide information about what a CT scan image is, when it's done, what the limitations are, so that the patient can intelligently discuss the results of that image with his doctor. So when the doctor says something about, oh, I'm going to treat this particular shadow, the patient's red light will know this is not correct. You're actually using the technology to empower the patient with information so the patient can say yes to sensible treatment, and the patient also has veto power so he can say no to treatment which he doesn't need. And I think the only way of being able to do that is by using technology. I always tell my patients, there's no point in coming and seeing me at the clinic. I'm a human being. How many patients can I see in a day? Maybe 4, maybe 5. Whereas if patients send me an email, my efficiency and ability to be able to answer increases so much more. And it doesn't take away the empathy in any way, because whenever they actually come to physically see me, but I think the reality is lots of medical problems can be treated very, very simply, because often all the patient needs is just some reassurance or just some hand-holding. He doesn't have to travel halfway across the city just to spend 2 hours waiting in my clinic just to see my face just for 2 minutes.
Did you?
more? Okay.
Well, a different subject. I mean,
Yeah,
you presented sort of what you're doing, but I mean, so
Yeah.
how do you see the use of technology addressing what you presented?
Yeah, actually, I was there in the morning, and morning sessions were very good. I wanted to respond, but I will share with you my opinion. You know, technology, unless and until it is useful, people will not adopt. You know, your children, small children, they go to Facebook and use Facebook every day, in and out, every hour they check. Why? Because it is useful, it is entertaining, and so they are hooked to that. So similarly, technology, if it is useful to the patient or to the doctor, it will be definitely adopted. And second thing I would like to share with you that technology is evolving, but you know, obsolescence is very fast. Yesterday only I dismantled my computer, which was about 4 or 5 years old. At that time I was proud I have the latest computer. Today I have thrown it out and I was thinking what junk I have. So obsolescence is very fast. So we must think of, you know, we have, in India we have 1.21 billion people. And you know, people cannot afford, you know, food also. And government also, they have a lot of money but a lot of work to do. So government has to, when government has to implement anything, it should be, you know, benefit most of the people, and it should be very, very cost effective, and it should be, obsolescence should be slightly longer, not in few years and all. So those things are there. And one more thing I will share with you, only 1 minute, that now the mobile is there. In fact, it is going to rural area also. Poorest of the poor, they have mobiles, and now 3G is also their cost is going down. So when video conferencing is possible, so practically you can see the patient from any part of the India or world. So when that is possible, many of your other things may be add on, but basic it will be tackling that by video conferencing you will be able to see the patient, you will be able to talk to any doctor. So basically it's a management issue also. If we have to, you know, see any record and all, we can get through email. We always do, and you know, we can seek opinion by email, we can make a phone call. So it is the ego problems of the doctors as well as the management issue. They are also important beside technology. Thank you.
Just set that on the table. We have two panelists that have to leave at 3 o'clock, so I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions, if there are some from the audience. If not, we have a few other discussion points. The others may be able to stay for a little bit longer, but I wanted to make sure we respected their time. So, see, there's at least one.
Thanks. I had one patient who sent an email that he had some problem in his throat, and he had an MRI which was had some thickness in the piriform fossa. I'm just what Dr. Ganpati has said. It has to be used judiciously. I'm just emphasizing on that. Now, one major center has said that he will go for robotic surgery. A biopsy report and an upper GI report is there. And it says that the patient will, and final diagnosis has been made, some thickness, carcinoma in situ in piriform fossa. And one center had said that he will go for robotic surgery. So they went to another center said he will require radiotherapy. At this point, I have received this report because they are confused. And when I see this report, I am also thinking that what is this report and what do I suggest from this? If I see this report, then I would probably say, oh, either one is okay. But what I do, I just call this patient, I just take a simple history. And he tells me only two specific history that I have additionally have taken. One is he has got anorexia, that is loss of appetite, and loss of weight. Both of these does not explain just thickness in the piriform fossa and some pain in the throat. I just do a full PET scan, and lo, he has got multiple metastases in the bone, multiple in the, and primary in the lung, with multiple metastases in the liver. So you see, we have to be very sure how to use the technology. We just cannot take the technology for the treatment purpose randomly or just this thing. This is what Dr. Ganpati specifically said, that we have to use the technology judiciously with complete way. I was not able to understand why this particular person, just with carcinoma in situ, which is a very rare diagnosis, would have dysphagia or with this. So I just went out with this. So it has to be there.
Thank you. Other questions?
My name is Anant Koppar. I am a research scholar as well as CEO of a company. Last 4 years I've been doing work with the rural health care. And whenever we have been discussing here, we are discussing very specific cases, one cancer patient or one ophthalmology patient or something. But as my research goes, I have seen around 20,000 patients in the last 4 years. 90% of the patients come with very simple symptoms. I have headache, I have throat ache, or I have backache and things like that. And the scenario in the Indian villages is such that there is no doctor available. Though he is supposed to be there, he is not there. So we need to use technology for these 90% of people rather than talking about 10% of the people. 10% of the people cannot be treated just by technology. But technology can be very well used for the 90% of the people. And I think it will add a big value if you use the technology.
Can I respond to that, please?
Please, please.
The question, sir, is how do you identify which is the 90 and which is the 10? That is where the problem is. You are absolutely right. But after 36 years of clinical experience, I have no qualms about confessing that I would not be able to categorically say which group falls into the 90, which falls into the 10. That is where clinical wisdom comes. No computer, no clinical decision-making system. I'm quite familiar with artificial intelligence. I'm quite familiar with neural systems, etc., etc. Nothing can ever replace this computer. And whether you can't teach empathy, you can't teach. Of course you can teach. You can give lectures on how to empathize with a patient. But the milieu, the environment. See, we were all brought up in an era when there was no technology.
Actually, we are not talking about replacing the doctors. We need to produce more doctors. We need to have more.
We don't need to produce more doctors. We need to produce more.
What we are saying is, if the doctor is not available, 90% of these people can get through telemedicine some kind of a treatment. 10%, I'm not sure. But if I come with a throat pain, the doctor says.
The question is who falls in the 90 and the 10. That's what I'm trying to say.
This patient had also come with just throat pain. So we didn't know. So what my thought is that what we need the technology is just to probably at the initial stage in India, we need to do it for chronic disease management, like basically prevention sort, not on just prevention, but screening, tele-screening. Tele-screening is something which will include cancer, hypertension, blood pressure, cataract, which can be easily done through tele-screening. That is something like comprehensive project that we can make and give it to the rural as well as to the urban, where we do a sort of a self-help program for the urban people, and maybe in the rural area we have a group of the ANM or the ASHA workers who are specially trained or volunteered to take down the notes, take down some simple, very simple history or simple history of that patient, the demographic or epidemiological history, and then send it to the specialist who is sitting at Apollo or somewhere else, and he just sees through that history and says, probably he has got some particular disease and he needs to see the doctor. That is where probably the technology will come in right now in India. Later on, we can increase in the mass process to tele-screening and from tele-screening to telemedicine and maybe tele-follow-up and tele-support groups where we can just make it as we can go up. So first and foremost is tele-screening project that has to come up. Yeah.
But of course, you're in a better position to answer, but in my humble opinion, and I just pass on the microphone afterwards, because of the scope of this problem, I think we do need a filtering system like you have said. So I personally feel if we are in a remote area or whatever area, rather than having a doctor look at a patient first, if we would have some system like the ASHA worker who can do the first screening, it would reduce the load of the doctors. And I have to apologize, I'm afraid I'm agreeing with you, Dr. Ganpati, but I'll try to see to it that I keep it to a minimum. I feel that if we could do that, then as Dr. Ganpati said, probably the number of doctors that we have are sufficient. It's a question of using their resource better. And I think that is where it will become much more efficient. But I'm passing on to Dr.
Yeah.
Actually, in cataract, our cataract program is very successful. We are doing about 5 million every year. They are going up to the village level. So about that, they have simple test and ASHA is involved. They get incentive also. For taking the patient also, they get some money. Operation also, some money is given. So that I will not touch now. About diabetes and hypertension, we are involving ASHA. In 20,000 sub-centers, the kits have been supplied, training is being given, and they are expected to screen at least 50% of the adult population and the pregnant women. And regarding the cancer, we could not go below the district. Even in the district, there is right now practically we have not been successful. So because cancer requires higher interpretation, diagnosis can be possible by biopsy. So for that we are still struggling.
Sir, exactly this is where I put in myself. Actually, what we are depending on is the ASHA workers to become intelligent enough to diagnose those cases. This is where I differ. What I am telling is, these ASHA workers are just trained to take down the notes and just to do a simple test for the people. And for that, we can devise like telecervicogram, teleorogram, even for that breast examinations, neck examinations that they can do and just note it down. They are not supposed to become, like the cervical project that we have, where the ASHA worker needs to diagnose whether this patient has got some problem with the cervix or not has the problem. So we don't expect that she should become that intelligent.
What we are doing is we are imparting the self-breast examination technique and other common symptom and all that ASHA is being empowered for that. But I am referring to the cervical screening that is not possible by us below district at present. But other things, ASHA is being empowered, training is being imparted, and regarding the NCD screening, we have in 7,000 these community health centers, there will be NCD clinic. Anybody can walk in, get checkup and go. Right now, if you go to any hospital, they will say you don't come. But even at the CHC and district, there will be a board, NCD clinic, and anybody for preventive and treatment, they can walk in. So that is the change we are bringing in.
Sir, I totally agree with you. And just to add technology to that, what we need to do is this, that center at the primary health center, wherever it is, if we just connect it with the telemedicine, telescreening, where those data which are taken and immediately sent, maybe offline or online, and they're sent to the main center or to the specialist. We make a group of specialists throughout India who just sees it and screens, okay, these are the people who are likely to need further treatment or they're totally normal. So that would actually increase the efficiency of the ASHA worker, and there will be also, we would know that actually whether they are doing some work or not. We'll have the data of the, and we can develop the whole data bank with us for the whole UHID.
If it is pure data, then it would make sense to use some type of a computer-based algorithm like the Framingham or the Munster database, which is the ESC database, to assess the risk and based on that decide who gets the consultation. But a doctor seeing the values, I feel, would not make much sense. Or have I misunderstood?
No, we need to use those equipments which are also available now.
Yeah.
Like we have got the blood pressure instruments which are now Bluetooth enabled equipments which are available. So we need to use those and add some of those like telecervicogram which is now available. So these things have to be added so that to the armamentarium at the periphery level, the person just puts the blood test, automatically that is taken down in the computer.